Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on this presentation about people and places. I'm Steve Ferris, I'm the Programme Manager at Agilysis and for Safer Roads Berkshire, and I've been working in road safety for the past 8 years. Now, I'm not going to mention the elephant in the room about how much things have changed over the past few months, but what I really am glad to see is how well everybody is adapting, which is allowing us all to continue to deliver road safety. And with that, I'd also like to mention how delighted I am to be part of this first Road Safety Festival. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to look at different data sources about how we can improve the targeting of active travel promotion and using a specific case study. While there is also an option to look at this data from an engineer's point of view, I'm going to primarily focus on looking at the data from a practitioner's point of view. So let's take a look. First of all, we need to think about who it is that we're going to be targeting, because not everybody's going to be the same, and different kinds of people are going to respond differently to different kinds of messages. So try to be as specific as possible when thinking about who your audience actually is. So what kinds of data are available for us to look at? Firstly, most of us are going to have access to local authority casualty data. So this is the data that comes from the Stats 19 figures, and we'll be able to tell you how many people have been injured as cyclists and pedestrians. But more importantly, it's going to be able to help you identify who is at the most risk of becoming injured if they're travelling by those modes. You can enhance this by looking at using surveys or market research. In the case of schools, simple travel surveys asking how did you get to school today is going to help you start identify how people travel, and also will help set a baseline for future evaluation. The same can be done for workplaces relatively easily. Surveys, which will answer questions more currently if people are travelling at all, but also what kind of distances they need to cover to get there. You may want to take this one step further and actually conduct some market research. So this is research that is conducted with everyday people on the streets, and you can ask them more detailed questions to get their views and perceptions on what different modes are, such as their views on cycling or cyclists. And it will also help you start identify what the barriers may be into getting them to switch modes. All of this is going to really help you when you look at what kinds of messaging it is that you're going to be using in a much more targeted way. Once you've been able to identify who your target audience is, we need to start thinking about where it is that people are trying to get to and where it is that they're travelling from. In the following example, I'm going to show you it's fairly simple, schools. But it might be places of work, shopping or leisure destinations, and equally it is important to know where they're travelling from, in most cases usually their home. Once you have this data together, you can start thinking about solutions, because it won't always be one size fits all. So let's take a look at how we put this into practice. In this example, we're going to be using a case study from Wokingham. We're looking at data in the Active Streets Assessment tool, and we're going to be focusing on this one single school here, Hawkden Primary. We do already know from school travel surveys that the majority of people who attend this school live in this area here. And we also know that some of them do already walk to school. However, some of them, the majority of them, still drive to school. And obviously what we want to do here is increase the active travel. So let's have a look at some data on this road. So I'm going to recolor this map according to speed compliance. So let's have a look at 85th percentile, and let's look at peak AM. Okay, so now it's redrawn the map according to speed compliance, and we can see that a lot of the residential roads are greyed out, so cul-de-sacs, residential roads. That's because we don't have enough data to accurately look at their speed limits. But what we're more interested in are these main roads, main routes, which connect up these areas. So anything here which has been marked out in pink has got higher speeds to it. So let's have a look at one of these roads, an example. So we're going to pay particular attention to this road which runs down through here, so Meredith Way. Let's click on that section and we can pull up some of the information for this road. So we can see that it has a speed limit of 30 miles an hour. We can see some width and gradient information as well. We'll come back to the traffic flow Let's have a look particularly at speed. So we're going to look at 85th percentile, AM peak speed. Here we can see that the AM peak speed is 32.5 miles per hour, which is quite high, particularly for a 30-mile-an-hour road. So it's certainly a high-speed road. If we have a look at the congestion index below as well, which means that it is a free-flowing road with fairly high vehicle speeds in the AM. So this is certainly something to be aware of if we're looking at promoting active travel and choosing a safe route. Let's go back to this traffic flow as well. So this is annual average daily flow, which is a modelled figure, and we can see that it is 1,369. That means that many vehicles travel along that road daily. If we recolour the map according to that, we can have a look to see what that looks like. So now we've recolored the map according to flow. We can see that this road that runs across the top here has got a higher flow figure than the one running down here. However, it's still coloured at a green. If we remember that figure, it was 1369. And if we have a look at the key here on the right hand side, we can see that it's very much middle of the road. So we still do have high vehicle speeds, low congestion, which means it's free flowing, and you've still got a moderate amount of traffic travelling along this road, which means that it may be a barrier for these people who live in this residential area to travel across to the school. So let's have a look at this road on Street View and see what it looks like. So here we can see on Street View, this is that roundabout that we were looking at. To the right here is heading towards the school, and to the left of this roundabout is heading towards that residential area. And we can see that the road looks to be quite straight, going off in the distance. We do have crossing points here, so we do have pedestrian refuges at all 4 points along this roundabout. If we have a look in the other direction to see what the road is doing, we can see that there's a slight bend in the road which might obscure traffic from pedestrians who wish to cross at the roundabout, particularly if those vehicle speeds are quite high. So this overall is something that you might want to consider putting in some better infrastructure, or if you have access to school crossing patrols, it might be a priority for looking at to increase those modes of active travel. Let's have a look again at the Active Streets tool. So now let's have a look at a different layer. If I turn on the Open Street Map view, we can see that there are actually some off-road routes which connect up this residential area to the school. So you can see them marked there. And we can see them also if we turn on the cycling layer map as well. We can see that there's a good cycle route which runs off-road between that residential area as well. So it still means that roundabout is a little bit of a barrier, but we can see that there are primarily off-road routes, which would certainly encourage people who are not familiar with travelling by active means, and they may not even be aware that off-road routes exist, especially if they're only using the car all of the time. So let's have a look at some other information. If I switch this back to the Esri map, we also have Bicycle Ownership Index. This information is taken from Experian Mosaic, so it is current. It has just been updated, and we can see that it's coloured the map according to how likely people are to already own a bicycle. So the darker the colour, the better. So we can see that in the south of this area, people are likely to own a bicycle, and less likely so in this northern area. If we also have a look at the No Exercise Index, so this has coloured the map about how likely people are to exercise, or sorry, how likely people are not to exercise. So here we have the lighter the colour, the better. So it's quite good because we have a light colour, again, in this residential area, and ironically, the closer that people are to the school, the less likely they are to exercise. And finally, if we have a look at the population density, you can see how densely populated these areas are. The darker the colour, the more heavily populated they are. So we can see that there's a fair number of people who do live in this area, and therefore we can help prioritise how we're going to be promoting active travel to these people. So through use of this tool, we've helped identify areas which are suitable for cycling promotion, or areas which you're more likely to have success in modal shift, particularly to active travel means. We've looked at if there are any potential barriers, such as roads which require potential infrastructure upgrades. This might be pop-up infrastructure, or if you're lucky enough to still have access to school crossing patrols. Now, obviously, all of this information would be improved with a sense of local knowledge or information from the schools as well, especially if you've done travel surveys to schools before, and will help in the monitoring and evaluation moving forward. And we do also have identification for active travel routes. So this is a free resource which you can access through the website, and this helps you define by use of street posters the approved or suggested active travel routes. And this might be a way of identifying off-road routes in particular, if people are not familiar with them, especially if they're always driving. But you can use it for on-road routes as well. So you can access this free resource through the website at toolkit.activestreets.uk. Let's just take a look at that. So it's essentially a poster generator. So we have a number of color codes here as well. If you want to set up multiple routes across your authority area, you can do that. We're also able to add an icon or a couple of icons if you've got overlapping routes, similar to how diversion signs work at the moment, which we're all familiar with, and then also marking whether it's a walking, cycling, or a both route. And you just hit the generate button, it generates a PDF which you can then print and distribute or use as a street poster. Of course, this is just one example of an active travel solution following the data trail that we've been talking about. There are other options available, engineering solutions aside. In the case of schools, you might be looking at school streets, alternative drop-off zones, or putting in park and stride. Other solutions may also be through targeted campaigns through social media or in the community. Setting up residence groups or areas, or perhaps someday returning to running events in collaboration with workplaces. I hope that you found this presentation useful. If you have any questions or would like to discuss any of the tools or methodologies that I've used, then please get in touch via the email address on the screen. Thanks for watching.